Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. And welcome back to this next episode. And today I am joined by the deliciously in pink, I know you can't see her, but she looks amazing, Sharon Lawton. Sharon, hello. Would you like to introduce yourself? Let everyone know, the listeners, where it is and what you do.
Well, thank you, Vicky, and thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. Really looking forward to talking to you. So as you rightly said, my name's Sharon Lawton. I'm head of training and business development at the Coaching Academy. Prior to that, I trained to be a professional accredited coach and qualified in 2009. And since qualifying in 2009, I've had the privilege and pleasure of sort of coaching right the way sort of across business and in the charity sector and within families. And then in 2011, I came across DISC, and since training in DISC, and I've sort of built up my knowledge with practice and additional training and things. It's been sort of part of everything, just like you, really, Vicky. Everything that I do, both in my personal and in my professional life. So yeah. So now I'm at the sort of the privileged stage of being able to train others to use DISC as well. So yeah, really exciting. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Oh, yes. So you are now officially a master DISC practitioner. Is that what it is? Which means, yes, you are the
Yeah,
trained
master disc
trainer.
practitioner. Yes,
Mm.
yes, yes. Very exciting. Sounds very grand, but
Ah, it just puts you at that level. It's not a doff capping exercise, but it's one of those respects of the level that you've trained to. So just for those that are listening, do you want to just give them the understanding of what your profile is in DISC terms?
yeah, sure. So my profile is ID, or yellow red, depending on which way round you prefer to sort of talk about it. I mean, I hesitated there because it does depend on what environment I'm in, as you well know. So it just sort of transfers. But yeah, I recognise myself predominantly as ID, yellow, red.
Yeah. So very similar to me until I go, under pressure, and then I go very DI. And it's great. It's you think to yourself, we rub along in life, and it's very easy to get on with people who are very similar styles to us, aren't we? But using DISC for all aspects, and it's the core of what we do is about flexing our style when we recognise that we're with somebody who's a different style to us. But I wanted to ask you a question because you did a lot with schools as well. You've done a lot with younger people and families. So what impact has DISC had on you, as in your personal and your business life, but the impact that you've had working with families?
I'm really glad that you've brought that up because I think predominantly people tend to look at psychometric profiling tools like DISC as just in sort of the corporate world or in professional, but it is absolutely fundamental to understanding who we are. Um, so for myself, it's been transformational. It's allowed me to be much more, I use the word tolerant. I don't know if that's the right word, really, but much more understanding of other people's differences. So I don't sort of go around in my ego state saying, oh, they're just doing it to get on my nerves and, they're doing it on purpose to wind me up and aren't they so stupid? All of the sort of the things that we do when we're sitting in our ego state. Now I'm much more aware of the fact that, what the strengths of other people's styles actually can complement mine for me to be able to sort of do a job or get on with people in a much better way. And as a result of that, actually, my life has become richer. um, schools, it's enough about me, schools, it has been absolutely fantastic to be able to take it into the educational environment. And I started to use it within my own coaching practice, and I was working a lot with young people. And I started to bring in just sort of the general understanding of the disc styles, because a lot of the young people I was working with were struggling with self-confidence, feeling good enough, feeling less than. And when I started to bring that, I could literally see the light bulb moments going off, and young people going, "Oh, okay, so it's not that, you know, I'm odd or I'm weird. It's just that my personality is different to that person." So taking it into schools helped on so many different levels, not just on that level, which was very similar to how I was working one to one in a coaching environment, but it allowed young people to be able to see why certain classmates maybe again they clashed with, or let's use the word irritated them a little bit more, or why they rubbed up against each other a little bit more, why certain people in the class kept asking additional questions when they just wanted to get on with their work that the teacher had set them. But also things like understanding that the disc styles also affected their teacher's teaching style. And it wasn't necessarily that a teacher didn't like them, it was that the teaching style was different. So, that yellow style, the I style, may have been sort of allowed everybody to chat in class or sort of did fun quizzes and that type of thing. And a different teaching style, maybe one that was a little bit more sort of blue or C style, were more rigid and more detailed, and sort of followed the rules of the fact that okay, well, I've set you some work, you don't talk, you just get on with it. So it was very interesting to see not just the children take so much away from it on lots of levels, particularly in that transitional stage to secondary school, but right the way across the board, but also inadvertently, because the teachers were sitting and listening, it was enlightening for them as well, because they started to get a unique way of potentially unlocking the potential of the students in their classroom from a very different perspective.
Oh, I wish you could have been at my school. That would have been wrong because you'd have been at school yourself. But the way you've just described that teaching style, I swear you've just described my French teachers. So the French teacher I had before I took my options was the I style. It was the fun style. It was the great learning that I loved, and I loved French. And then when I took my options, I went into a different French teacher's class, and she was very blue, very C style, and it was that's your work, you won't talk until you finished it. And that's not how I learn. And it's like, but no, with no self-awareness, then you start you it's that labeling. And we always say about doing any kind of profiling, it's not about labeling. But before you do it and have awareness, do we not label people? Oh, they're just weird, like you said, they're irritating. Oh god, they just talk, why can't they shut up? Or they're just rude. So I mean, I love it, as you know, it's fascinating. If I could talk about the emotional intelligence part of it, because when we do disc, and obviously I was trained by master practitioners, Bev and James at the Coaching Academy, we talk about disc strips back to the basic wiring and it takes out all of those other influences. But the emotional intelligence part is the part that I really love to bring in. And when we were talking before, you've talked about it. What impact knowing disc and adding in that EI over the top has? How would you describe that?
Oh gosh, I think that's the golden thread actually that sort of runs through everything. And when we can't change anything unless we're aware of it, right? So if nothing changes, nothing changes, but you've got to raise your self-awareness of perhaps what's helpful and maybe what's not before we do any personal development. So just understanding the basic styles, or what your blend is, and what people in your team or your family's blend is, starts to raise your self-awareness, and then you can make the choice on whether or not you decide you want to flex, because it's about you modifying, not other people, because we have to ourselves be the one to to make the change. And when we make the change and we do something different, then we find the response is different as well. But if we look at, and you're right, our personality is multifaceted, and DISC is that basic wiring. This is where I think when we read sort of books or we start to look at the model in isolation, this is where people sort of think, oh, well, isn't it just labeling, just like you were saying? But when we understand the fact that, DISC is only one dimension of who we are, and, we are made up of many, many layers, the onion, if you like. It's for me the most important one that layers on top of all of the nature, nurture, all of the life experiences, all of the role models that we have in our lives, sits the emotional intelligence. And the knowledge of the self-awareness that comes with learning about not just our own styles, but other people's styles, and that ability to modify, to manage the different situations and the outcome, builds the emotional intelligence. Now, if we look at it from the other lens, so look at it through the other end of the telescope, we can start to see how lack of emotional intelligence gives us a skewed perception. So if we just characterize one of the styles, so red, so D, very dominant, sort of that sort of go get them, blunt to the point, etc., etc. So when you read the sort of the characteristics and the styles of, let's say, that red energy, that D style, you could very much say, oh, I'm not sure I really want to be around that type of person, or I'm not really sure I like myself. But the emotional intelligence allows somebody with a very high, prominent red or D style to say, right, okay, knowing what I know, my traits, my characteristics might then come across as rude, blunt, to the point, uncaring, only thinking about the task, results driven, not interested in the people element. And the knowledge of that builds my emotional intelligence enough to know that I might need to tone that down depending on whom I'm working with. So emotional intelligence is absolutely huge. Because otherwise we just go around what I call sort of dumping our disc on people. This is my style, this is the way I am, you just got to put up with it. No, it's not. Not at all. So important, really important.
Yeah, there's definitely no excuse for bad behaviour, is there? And like you say, disc dumping is not, it's not helpful to anybody. It's like the whole point of understanding and looking in the mirror at yourself is, like you said, we can't change other people. It's about flexing and adapting our own style to get the best. And when we're with people who are very similar to us, we don't need to. We just rub along, don't we? We just get along. Yeah. It's when you've got the other styles that we need to adapt.
I think a really easy way to sort of think about that, just to sort of put it in real layman's terms, and you know what I'm like, Vicky, I like to take it back to sort of really easy, practical sort of ways of looking at things. If you some people are in natural rapport, and if you walk alongside somebody that you have a natural sort of affinity and rapport with, you sort of walk in step with them, don't you? Yeah, it feels natural. Yes, you might naturally adjust your speed and your stride so that the walking along beside each other, becomes very easy. You're in step, you're in tune. But if you're not aware of that, and the speed in which you're walking or the speed in which somebody else is walking, it's very difficult. You might be sort of constantly trying to run to catch up with somebody, or sort of looking behind you, wondering where that person is and why are they not keeping up. So that sort of walking in step with somebody. That's what the knowledge of DISC, and that's what the emotional intelligence bit allows us to do, to modify our pace and our steps so that we can be naturally in rhythm with someone. So we're not sort of clashing or disc dumping. I've decided that's a thing now, disc dumping.
I'm gonna borrow. I'm just gonna share that. I'll credit you for it.
Yeah, do.
And like I say, when you're doing the step part of it, you can actually just even take it back even to a more simpler term. I always think of it when you're at school and you have to get in the 3-legged race, and you literally tie your legs. I don't actually know if you're allowed to do that. Probably health and safety said you can't now. But you did, didn't you? And you, there was always someone that you just got with that you could do the three-legged race with, and then there were other people where you just couldn't, and you would just be tripping over each other. And it's like that's the opposite personality styles. Unless you're going to prepare to say right, left, right, and it's I love being able to use that kind of thing, because we've all done. I'm sure most of us have done the three-legged race, or pretend the three-legged race. So if let's lay another piece of the onion skin over and talk about the boundaries and the values part of it. So I know that values, to me, mine have changed because life's experiences changes those. What about yourself? What do you think when we talk about our own core values with a personality?
I think definitely mine have changed as well. And I think that's all about working on yourself, isn't it? You become, and as you get a little bit older and more mature and stuff, then potentially our values do change. For me, definitely one of my core values is authenticity and connection. So that sort of honesty around, sort of being able to be with somebody and not a case of, we're back to disc dumping again, what you see is what you get. It's not about that, but knowing that the person that you're with is you can trust them. They're, you feel good when you're around them. You can trust them with, your sort of your thoughts and what's going on for you. So authenticity is really important for me. And honesty, in as much as, yeah, it's funny because I'm just thinking of the fears and the motivators of the different styles that keeps popping into my head as well. But yeah, sort of so the connection and the honesty. So the reason why I'm thinking about that is it's quite interesting because I've got that little bit of D in my profile. And that sort of, I guess, the loss of control bit is important to me because, I guess, if I'm gonna support you, I'm gonna sort of trust you. I'm gonna go do whatever I need to do to support you to move forward. But then, if something doesn't go right, then it's I might sort of feel like I've sort of lost control. And the connection with people, the honesty and the authenticity and connection with people, again, is the yellow energy, I guess, isn't it? I hadn't thought about this before. Just talking about it now, it's interesting how sometimes our values start to overlap with the disc profiling for the fears and the motivators as well. Interesting when you start to unwrap it a little bit, but yeah. So connection, authenticity, honesty, they're sort of I would say, my driving values.
Interesting that you, like you say, you're connecting them with the fear factor of the different profiles. So I started thinking there about, what's a blue and a green there, and an S and a C style. But they can have different, because we can connect with someone who's of a different style just by having the same values, can't we?
God, yeah.
Because whilst you can't see them, and you can read people's personalities depending on whether they're, inward thinking or outward thinking, but values you can't, but you just do. Again, it's that emotional intelligence of what someone is thinking about. So if you could give the listeners a top tip on how you could easily read what the different styles are, how would you put that?
Well, it's funny because I think the brilliant thing about DISC is it's all based on observable behaviors. Communication styles or observable behaviors. And the reds and the yellows, the D's and the I's are easy to spot because, they are, fast moving, yellows, lots of sort of hand movements and, fast paced talking it out, want to connect, all of that sort of stuff. So they're much easier to spot, I think. So look out for that. Look out for, sort of the big gestures, the fast talking. And then conversely, we might not necessarily spot the other two styles. So, there's the S's and the C's, the greens and the blue energy, because they just don't feel the need to be, sort of upfront and personal. So very happy to be operating behind the scenes, but they're there quietly, maybe supporting or quietly and diligently getting things done in the background. So just sort of, again, just watch and observe. I mean, you know me, Vicky. I've never made any secret of the fact that I'm the type of person who likes to sit with a pair of sunglasses on, just people watching. So the summer is brilliant for me. On the beach, in the local coffee shop, I just watch people all of the time. Thank goodness for sunglasses is all I can say. Otherwise, I might get into a lot of trouble. But joking aside, you can learn a lot about people by just watching them. So that would be my top tip. If you're sort of not sure about, maybe what somebody's profile is, or just why you might not be getting on as well as you would like to, just take a step back and just quietly just observe. Are their pace of talking, are their body language, are their sort of decision making much quicker and faster than yours? Or conversely, is it the other way around? Are they somebody that you get frustrated with because they have to think things through rather than talk things out? So just be a little bit more observant. We live in a world where, it's sort of in your face. We want to get it done. Well, I'm talking from a very sort of ID perspective, get it done fast. But generally, as a society, I think we can take a lot away from that sort of mindful practice if we mindfully press the pause button and just observe, take time to smell the roses, if you like, and just see what people are doing. It can, how they're communicating, how they're moving, the pace in which they sort of make decisions and talk. I think that can tell you a lot about the sort of the profile that people are.
That's definitely another bit of emotional intelligence, isn't it? By actually just
Indeed.
being self-aware. Well, what about if someone sits very much on the task side and
Yep.
the people side? So we're talking about the red and the blue, so the D and the C versus the yellow and the green, the I and the S, because they can be, depending on their environment, outgoing or reserved, but they're very task versus very people. How would you say that you would be easy to read those types?
Okay, so in true high eye yellow star, I'm going to tell a story. So let's just imagine people that are listening, and this is one of my favourite stories, and I tell it all of the time when I'm explaining DISC. Just imagine that you're in a working environment and it's an open plan office, and you walk into the sort of the refreshment sort of coffee area, and there's a group of colleagues all sort of standing, chatting, talking around about the latest, I don't know, Netflix or whatever it is that's trending on the TV, and they're chit chatting away. And then another colleague comes in, grabs a coffee cup, gets their coffee, doesn't say good morning, and then walks away, opens up their laptop and starts sort of cracking away on their laptop. And this little group of people that are all sort of in the corner, sort of chit-chatting away, one of them turns to the rest of the group and says, "How flipping rude. How flipping rude." They come in, I've noticed, every day, and they never say good morning. They grab their coffee, they go over and start working on their work. I just can't believe how rude they are. And they can't be bothered to talk to me until later on, or then they'll want to talk to me when they want me to help them out with that project. Well, they can stuff it because I'm not going to help them. But what if they're not being rude? What if they're task focused, like you were saying, Vicky, and they're coming in and they're predominantly thinking about what they need to get done? Because they're driven by the task doesn't mean they can't connect in. It just means that's not the first thing they're thinking of. The needs driven part of their personality is about the to-do list, right? And once that bit of the personality is settled, then of course they can check in. And if we look at it the other way around, if you're the person who comes in the morning thinking, "Oh, here they go again, chit-chatting away in the corner. No wonder they never get any work done and they're always complaining they're behind on their project." Again, if you start thinking through the sort of the processes of how you think or talk about different situations, again, you can very, very easily see the task and the people. sort of side of things. So yeah, it's just, what we naturally gravitate towards, and we can see how people can rub each other up the wrong way just because of that, that task, that people sort of element, that focus. And you can sort of call it the inner magnet. It's what you're naturally sort of drawn towards, you migrate towards, because that's your preference. And that's all it is. It's just a preference. It's
Yeah.
not that you can't do the other thing.
No, exactly. But I do have clients, and I'm sure you do, that go, "Oh, I need to be more people-y like
Yeah.
you." I mean, what do you say to people like that? Someone who's trying to be a different style to what
Yeah.
they are.
It's really interesting because I get a lot of people, particularly if I'm coaching in leadership or middle leadership, and they say, well, what's the best style to have in leadership? And I would say the best style is the style that you have. It comes back to that authenticity thing again, because we don't want to be performing at life. We want to be living it, right? We don't want to be performing at something because that's exhausting. So it's about embracing your style, but knowing that actually the key is to flex.
Yeah.
So knowing, once you've got a really good understanding, working with somebody like yourself, Vicky, to raise awareness, listen to podcasts like this, work with a disc practitioner, get your profile done, have a good understanding of yourself, you'll have a good understanding of the model, which, allows you really to sort of start to be aware of how you can build better relationships and communication. Well, then, of course, what you're able to do is say, right, okay, well, knowing what I know, in order for me to get the best out of leading this team or connecting in with these people, I know that I'm going to use my own profile now. I know that my blue energy plots below the line, but the colleague I'm working with has very high blue energy. So I know I need to pick up the detail and slow down the pace, which is not my natural preference. And I really do emphasize that word preference, because it's not that I can't do detail. It's not that I can't abide by systems and procedures. It's just, I prefer not to most of the time, generally speaking.
Merely
So,
a
and I
suggestion.
think that's the thing. People forget it's just a preference, and we can change our preference. And interestingly, I would definitely say over the years that although my blend is the same, the intensity of the plotting points have shifted because of the emotional intelligence I'm now much more aware of certain things. And so my blue energy, my C plots a little bit higher in my profile because I've worked on that and I've developed it.
Mm,
But if you want to change your profile, you just need to be consciously aware of it. But be authentic and know that you can modify to manage to get the best out of the situation. That's the magic. That's the golden thread. That's where the emotional intelligence comes in.
yeah, definitely. Not that labeling, disc dumping or doing any of that.
No,
It's self-awareness, modify to manage. So when you get somebody, and I've had clients like this that have the opposite, so the red and the green, the D and the S, as we know, are opposites, and the I and the C, so the yellow
yeah,
and the blue are the opposites. But when you get someone who has a profile with an I and a C above the line, or a D and an S above the
yeah.
line, how, what do you say to people, like, how do you help support them, coach them?
That's again a really interesting question. And again, you were talking about emotional intelligence and that all important sort of self awareness raising of understanding why sometimes people feel, why do I feel this inner conflict sometimes? And that's often what clients will say, I feel this real inner conflict. I want to have fun with my colleagues, but, I need to get the work done. I once was working alongside somebody that had that very IC profile, and they would say my yellow energy will forgive the blue, the C, but my C won't forgive my I. It's sort of like, get the work done. Come on, stop wasting time. So if we can coach people to raise awareness of why that inner conflict might be happening, why they feel one thing and then feel another, it allows them to make choices. And that to me is really important. I talk to people a lot about stepping into their personal power. Um, all connected to our values and our emotional intelligence, but it's not about physical strength. That word power has sometimes quite negative connotations, but our personal power isn't physical strength, it's our emotional strength to know that we can make choices.
Mm.
And by making a choice, we can potentially get our needs met. And we all have a need around feeling accepted. We all have a need about, wanting to be seen and heard and valued and, all of those sort of things. And when we're aware of the different internal personality styles and preferences we have, then we know we can make choices. So this is the same with the DNS as well. So with DNS profile clients, there again can be some inner conflict, sort of wanting to get the job done, and then also thinking, oh yeah, but what about the team? How does that affect the team? And remember, teams come in lots of different forms. It might be the family team. It doesn't necessarily have to be the professional team. So yeah, so I think working with clients that have that, it's not a common style, but it's not particularly unusual. So with those sort of styles that we might consider to be opposites, just raising awareness of the strengths of both and the challenges. And okay, so how is that working for you? Knowing what you know about the D, and knowing what you know about the S part of your personality preferences. What choices does that give you? What are you able to do? What could you potentially dial up or dial down to support you to move forward in this particular situation? So self-awareness is the key to everything.
Oh,
Always.
absolutely. So, well, I was going to say, as we come towards the end of this interview, what would be your top tip if you could give one to the listeners?
Well, I would say, again, I think I've said it, self-awareness. Self-awareness is the key to everything. Don't disc dump, don't say, well, this is my style and that's it. If you find these, if you're not a practitioner, and you don't know a lot about disc, then continue listening to these podcasts, because I know they're going to be filled with so much rich and interesting information. And knowledge is power, isn't it? So be self-aware starts with us. So go and do a profile, find out what your style is, because that's the starting point. Once you know your style and understand the model itself, then that gives you the choices to be able to make any necessary changes.
And that's why this podcast is called It Starts With You.
Oh, gosh, well, there you are.
There you go. So honestly, Sharon, this has been fascinating. I love talking to you because I just love talking all things discs. So if anyone wants to get hold of you, what's the best place for them to find you?
Well, I hang out loads on LinkedIn. That's probably my main place, actually. So Sharon Lawton on LinkedIn. Also at the Coaching Academy, obviously, and delivering, sort of bits and pieces over there as well, and the disc training. So yeah, that's sort of potentially where you can find me and find out a little bit more about me and what we do there.
Fabulous. Well, I'll make sure that those links are put into the show notes as well, so that if people want to get in contact, they can. Sharon, it's been an absolute pleasure. As typical eyes, it's gone very, very quickly.
It's flown by, hasn't it? Well, I hope it's been helpful and useful. I mean, I would say, you've asked me about a top tip, and I'm going to challenge your audience, actually, who's listening today, is just to write down one thing that you're going to do as a result of today's podcast. Make a promise to yourself that you're going to commit to it.
I love that. And then go and find Sharon and me on LinkedIn and tell us what you've done, what the promise is and what you've done.
Yes.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Love it.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you again, Sharon. And I will catch up with you soon.
Pleasure. Take care. Anytime, Vicky. Thanks for having me.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.